Welcome to Hybrid Theory. I'm Aurian Archive, so let's get started. And once again, we are sewing things together. Expect a lot of that. It's a nice verbal transition from point to point as often as I like to go into tangents. Today's project, or this morning's project, is a continuation of multiple previous streams. Three of which haven't actually, let's just say last night wasn't good. All right. So what we have on the screen right now is we've got a notepad open showing us some outlines and some initial rankings on different power sets. And the idea here is, as discussed in a previous live stream, that if you really want to go and watch it, you can, please do. The previous live stream, I talked about a big issue for new players coming to City of Heroes. Somebody just told me how they dodged a ribbon cannon. They ducked by lying face down. Okay. Yeah, I've actually got a cut as per usual for me. I've got a number of different windows here open. You probably heard cracking the cryptic as finishing as I started this stream up, and I just watched Simon do Eudicos's puzzle with the rim band lines. So now it's time to focus on my own puzzle, which is getting back to the point here, the predication of a new player coming into City of Heroes. Now, in previous streams, the ones that you haven't seen because I deleted them, again, a couple of long stories here, trying to keep focused and to the point that the idea in 2004, when City of Heroes was launched, was already out. The idea of somebody going into a retail store and picking up a City of Heroes box and installing the game and playing it and having no idea what they were going into was a fairly. The only other MMOs before this, the only MMOs of note were EverQuest, Ultima Online, and Meridian 59. That's it. City of Heroes launched before most of the other big names. It launched before World of Warcraft. What a lot of people think they know about MMOs, City of Heroes broke that mold before them. Thus, playing City of Heroes. Back then, it was very possible for somebody to pick up the game, have no idea what they were getting into, or how to go through what they were looking at. Today, that's a very different, the scenarios are very different. Most players who are coming into City of Heroes now have to be doing so not because they found the game on a retail shelf or somebody handed them a demo disc at a convention or something like that. People are only going to be coming into City of Heroes now after they've read about the Homecoming server or an alternative server on a gaming site. They were fans of City of Heroes in the past and played it in the past. Or you have people, former players, who are introducing new players to the game. Children, friends who never played, co-workers who never played when the game was out. Thus, the average player, not the median, not the mean, the average player who comes into City of Heroes today likely already has some source of information on how to play and what their choices are in the game and how the game actually works. There is an entire wiki now, Paragon Wiki, devoted just to information on City of Heroes. The Homecoming forums are filled with guides and other information on how to work with City of Heroes. Thus, the concept of a player who's coming in completely blind, likely that those players can are you have to go through one of these servers and set up an account just to get into the game. It's not like you can say, "Well, I didn't know where to go look for help." Thus, the predication is The predication is not, can I replicate the experience of an entirely new player? Rather, the experience or the replication that I can perform is, how does a returning player start again? How does somebody who has played the game before or has access to the information, has some places that they can turn to for information, how, when they sit down to City of Heroes, any of the servers, how do they start playing the game to get to a point where they can bootstrap characters to run higher level builds that open up more content and more opportunities to run with various different teams? And there's a critical difference there, is the choices the choices are not being made in a vacuum. The choices are being made with specific goals in mind, a specific a different scenario. Instead of somebody new to the game, we're talking about somebody who has an erratic work schedule, maybe a doctor, a baker, a plumber, a termite technician, somebody who, they go out, they do work when the work is there to be done. They show up to do the catering work. They play it all odd hours. They don't really have a set schedule. They don't really have anybody they can actually play with because their schedule is so random. And thus they're really looking at, for their first character, they're looking at something that can power the rest of their character, something that they can, uh without having to specifically engage it. Like, I'm trying. It's part of this is working from my own experience when City of Heroes was back in 2010, 2009, 2008, when my schedule was, I could never run with my super groups, I could never run with the coalitions, I could never run with the global channels. Every time I played, nobody else was on. How do I progress? What do I progress with? How do I get the resources to slot multiple characters so that when something goes down, when somebody says, we're running an STF now, we need somebody who can do anti-mess. Do I have somebody who can bring strong anti-mess? Yes, I do. Let's go. We're running a Sister Psyche task force. We need somebody who can protect against endurance drain. Do I have somebody who can protect against endurance drain? Let's go. It's, how do you get to a point where you can build the characters that you want to play? And then we have from that point, so that's where we're really starting at, is what we're looking to create for our first character is maybe not a dedicated farmer, but a character who can do farming and do other things relatively decently. So they're not just going to be a one note character. There's someone where, if somebody needs is forming something, we can take this character, we can jump in there. And that's where we get to what's in our notepad over here. And on the notepad, we've got some requirements kind of set down. Is what we're looking for in an armor set is we're looking for a damage over time, a toggle PBAOE. And the reason we're looking for a toggle PBAOE is we want a way to put down reliable damage pretty early on. Again, going back to the whole erratic work schedule, this character is going to be spending a lot of time passive farming. We're going to throw it into 707 and just leave it sitting there. So if we've got a damage over time built into the armor set, we've got a little bit more damage going down. Our farmer's going to be a little bit more efficient. When we get into incarnate powers, now we have a spot to put down some of the buffs or debuffs or whatever. And I know that some people are going, wait, what interface buffs? And there aren't any in the current set. There were some tech tests on applying self buffs through the interface. I don't think any of them ever made it out of theory testing. All right. So the next thing we're looking at, we kind of have an idea of, we're looking at sets with armor sets that have a damage over time. We're looking at something that hopefully doesn't take a lot of resources to at least make decent. An armor set that maybe has an endurance recovery built in. An armor set that uh, is naturally strong. Okay. And then we have aggro management. We're looking for we're looking specifically for a set that will keep enemies close to us if we're doing this passive farming thing. It's one thing to have a character who can survive a passive farm. Oh, not much. But it's another one who can actually handle the aggro management. And that's going to, as we get into actually looking at the archetypes, X out one of the archetypes almost off the bat. And our last kind of requirements are consistency and predictability. Again, we're looking at probably passive farming a lot with our first character. They're going to be the ones that we go off to work, we have to run out the door, we have to answer the phone, we can just leave them sitting there and they still function. We still get some resource gain off of this avatar that we can then turn around and apply to a different character. All right. So those are kind of that's our quasi outline for what we're looking for our first character. What are our options? Now, since I've got the character creator open here, the first thing you probably need to know is that these origins really don't matter in terms of story progression or your character progression. They mattered at the start of the game, but the invention of origin enhancements pretty much broke the need to follow an origin path. So, unless you are picking for a role playing purpose, these choices really don't matter. And since another thing to consider is that your origin may be determined by the powers that you actually wind up with or the costume that you wind up making. And if you've gone down to body costume and you've actually done some of the work down here, you can come back and change your origin at any time before you actually log into the game. So your origin, even if you don't have an idea of what your character is going to be like yet, because we're right now we're focusing on function over form. What is this character going to do for us in game, not what is our character that we are bringing to life. We're doing the function first so that we can then bring our characters to life, the ones we actually want to make, and be able to afford to push those characters forward. All right, let's go over to our archetypes. Now, I'm going to do a quick. I don't ever really use this playstyle here, but to kind of close down the archetype that we're looking at, hitting tank gives us Tanker, Peacebringer, Warshade, Brute. Well, anyone who tells you that Peacebringers and Warshades are aggro management is flat out lying. They're not. Um, Melee damage. Okay, we've now got Scrapper, Tanker, Brute, Stalker, Widow, Soldier. Now, I've been running a Soldier recently. For various reasons, they fail most of our requirements over here. They don't really have any aggro management. They don't get damage over times. Stalkers are kings of and this is going to fit into consistency and predictability. Stalkers are king of single target damage. With the Stalker ATOs, you can deal out AV killing levels of damage, arc villain levels, slaughtering levels of damage without a lot of expenditure. Problem is, Stalkers are incredibly a mechanically focused set. To get the most out of them, you have to really drive a specific attack chain, and they don't get a lot in survivability, and they get almost no aggro management. So, thus, a Stalker kind of fails. It's not really consistent. It's not really predictable. It has no aggro management. It's really awesome on minimum resource outlay, and they don't get damage over times. So, the one place where Stalkers are really good is not enough to really. It's not going to be our first character. Brutes are kind of. I X'd them out for the same reason. They are a mechanical archetype. They depend on the player pushing a rage formula in order to drive damage. I've run a number of brutes and passive 707s. I'm just don't think that a brute is a good choice for a first character resource generation for everyone else right now. And part of that is because of some buffs that have landed on the Homecoming server and any servers predicated either upstream or downstream of Homecoming. Scrappers, I kind of also tossed out because of aggro management. Not all scrappers get a taunt aura. The general rule is if a scrapper armor requires a scaling factor, that is the number of enemies around the scrapper, then the scrapper has a taunt applied to that scaling aura to ensure that the scaling aura works as expected. You can do some really nasty things with scrappers. Bio armor and radiation armor scrappers. Let me phrase it like this. I have a Street Justice radiation scrapper. After the last rework that I made to that scrapper, I scrapped, no pun intended, the plans to remake that character as a different archetype. The amount of survivability you can generate with bio or radiation on a scrapper is huge. There's a caveat to that, though, and that caveat is those were very expensive builds. And one of our requirements here, first character, we don't have a lot of influence to work with. We're going to be picking up enhancement drops and recipe drops as we get to them. We're probably going to be spending a lot of time just sitting in a farm letting enemies walk at us and we defeat them in order to build up the resources to go and get the enhancements that are actually useful, or to go and run task forces to get us the reward merits that are actually useful to purchase enhancements for our other characters that we make later. Alright, Scrapper. So I'm not saying that these archetypes are bad or you should avoid them or you shouldn't play them. Don't get me wrong on that. They don't meet what our requirements are for a first character for a player who cannot be at the keyboard to team and run this character with teams. If you're running with teams, all of this goes out the window. Just run with teams, take what you get, and just go. Alright, so our solo player, we've settled on Tanker. And we've settled on Tanker because of the recent Tanker updates, which now give tankers greater AoE damage compared to the other melee archetypes. Tankers hit more enemies at a time than the other melee archetypes. The tanker damage have been buffed so that they are no longer the bottom tier, even if you're using the highest damage tanker set. Before, tanker damages were probably on par with defender melee, but now tankers are kind of punching about the same as stalkers without criticals. It's a massive night or day difference. Tankers no longer feel like you've been wailing on the enemy for 2 hours. Alright, we've settled on Tanker. We've got armor sets are our primary. We do know that because it's an armor set focus first, it should require less expenditure resources that we can get to start with to drive this character forward. Okay, let's go on to our armor rankings, and that's the ones down here. And we'll start at the bottom tier, and we'll work our way up to why I X'd various armors out, or why I ranked them as in this manner. Now, this is not a ranking in these armors are superior to other armors. These are armors that are how I rank them on meeting this list of requirements: the damage over time, the resource outlay, the aggro management, how consistent and predictable they are. They're not, let's avoid sets with mechanic limitations and focus on something that we can just park in the middle of a junction and go off, do our job, come back, do something, go off, do our job, come back. At the bottom, I put dark armor, and I put dark armor for a number of reasons. Dark armor has a giant gaping hole in the form of knockback protection. To counter the knockback hole, you are going to have to look at specific IOs, which increases the resource outlay that you'll need to run this character, or you'll need to take acrobatics at level 20, and then you'll need to think about the recovery to drive an extra toggle on top of the other toggles that your set gets. Now, in fairness, Dark Armor does have a couple of powers that are easily droppable in Cloak of Fear and Oppressive Gloom. And it does have a powerful self-heal. It's just probably not the best set for our first character, and this is kind of speaking from personal experience. You don't want to take a character that requires active mitigations to be your first character. Otherwise, you will have a miserable time playing, and even when you get on teams, you'll be like, why isn't this working? Next up is Invuln. And Invuln is one that I X'd out because it is a mechanically based character. And to demonstrate this, I will need to bring up mids. So give me a second here while I flash this over. And I want you. And I think you're the one I want. No, you're not the one that I want. But you're the one that I'll work with. Okay. And we'll go to Tanker. Let's make sure you can see everything here. And we're going to do Invuln. And I'm going to take our defense powers, which are Tough Hide, Invincibility. And we're going to come over here to Leaping and take Combat Jumping. And then we're going to take Leadership for Maneuvers. And we're going to do Kick, Tough, Weave. And now we're going to come back to our defense powers, and we're going to quickly slam each of our defense powers into ED Cap. Now, there's two ways that we can do this. For the sake of sanity, I've got two level 50 defense buffs plus 5, and we see they're giving us 56.56. 3 single origin enhancements in a row gives us 56% flat. Now, since I'm kind of already used to just doing the IOs plus, that's how we'll just run those up, because those give us an optimal view. And if I do plus 3 all the way up, we see that our 3 single origins max gives us 57.35%, a little better than our crafted IOs at plus 5. And the reason why this will matter, collectively speaking, later on, is that as we get to where we can craft IOs, we can go ahead and craft singles like these and know that we're not losing that much compared to where single origin enhancements would be within the level range. And that'll be very important for minimizing our resource outlay on how much it'll take to actually run this character. And there we go. All of our defense powers are bumped. And we go to our totals and we see that we're running 23% to Smashing Lethal Energy Negative Fire Cold. Okay. Let's turn on Combat Jumping and Weave because that now brings us up to 31.53%. Now let's lock off Invincibility. And we're going to bump this up to 1. And we're going to come back and we see that with one enemy faced against us, with all of our native defense powers or quick pool powers that we can go get with defense, we are at 33% defense. Let's go back to our info and we're going to bump this up to 8. At pump 8, at 8 enemies, we now have 44 defense to Smashing Lethal Energy Negative Fire Cold. We bump this up to 9 and we're at 45.62%. We are into defensive soft cap against our Smashing Lethal Energy Negative Fire Cold melee. Sorry, not melee. To our Smashing Lethal Energy Negative Fire Cold defenses on just theoretically single origin enhancements. We could just do 3 of these defense buffs on these other powers, and we'd still be there right at 45% defense. Now, the caveat here is that you're only at this level of defense when you're standing in the middle of a mob. If you're able to push mob to mob to mob, that's okay. And this is why on some builds or some phrases you'll see me talk about single target defensive soft caps. And what that means is that your invuln is into the defensive soft caps when standing next to a single target, not standing in the middle of a mob. And that matters because for an invuln, when you really do need to be soft capped against a single target is likely when you're fighting an arc villain. So having single target soft cap defenses is incredibly important for invulnerability, but that's a tremendous resource outlay. And we'll probably need this again, so we're going to just move it down to the background and put it behind. Actually, I think that may be confusing. All right, so invuln also, uh, so it's got a maximal resource outlay to make it actually work against anything but a full mob. It doesn't have a damage over time. The aggro management is not that great. You can Most players can strip aggro away from an invuln. Consistency and predictability, okay, it is consistent, it is predictable, but it's mechanical, and you have to be pushing always keeping maxed mobs if you don't have a good resource intensive IO build. So that's why it's so far down on the list. Super reflexes. Okay, I've got a dual blade super reflexes tanker, or super reflexes dual blades tanker. Let's get those powers in the right order. My character can go into 707 plus 4x8, stand in the middle of a junction, and passive farm. And that's because super reflexes does give you scaling resistances. Let's bring up our information here. As your health drops, your resistance goes up. But there are some caveats here. Some SRs, I think Sentinels only, in the game get a choice or Master Brawler, which is a constant own power that gives Super Reflexes a heal or something, either a heal based on HP level or an endurance based on HP level. It was a really creative take on fixing the problem with Practice Brawler, and that Practice Brawler is a click that does nothing but give you anti-maz. That kind of is why SR is so low on this ranking. In order to passive farm, you probably need to have an attack power on auto. Now, if you're doing a 707 fire farm, you probably don't need anti-mez because NPC fire is all about incoming damage, not debuff the living daylights out of you. So, there I go, sewing things up again. Thusly. Anyways, Practice Brawler, because you'd want to in casual play or average play, team play, whatever, have it on auto, have that be your auto power, lessens what other powers you can put on auto. And that's why it's just so far down the list. Not that you can't be creative with it, but to do really astounding things with super reflexes, you're going to need to chunk a metric ton of resources into it. And okay, there's kind of a caveat here. Super reflexes is ludicrously easy on a tank to soft cap defense. I mean, incredibly easy. You can almost do it accidentally without even trying. But there's a big difference between having just soft cap defenses and having something else behind it. Because super reflexes only gets defense as its primary power, as its primary defensive method. Yes, those scaling resistances are nice, but you need to survive long enough for those scaling resistances to kick in. If you're at 1/3 health and your scaling resistances really haven't kicked in, and bosses start hitting you on critical strike for maximum damage, the bosses or arc villains will quickly blow past your scaling resistance and you'll be dead because you don't have anything else there. And case in point would be Tower Boosted Recluse. Tower Boosted Recluse can just shoot past the the scaling resistances and drop my SR tank without even really trying. In order to counter that, you will need to invest in some resist boost, regeneration boost, plus HP boost. And yes, you can get all of that. You can make an amazing character, but it's still a massive resource outlay for first character, passive farm, very early on, super reflexes, just finds itself at the bottom of the pile. And next up is fire armor, and I can already see some heads tilting going, hang on, isn't fire armor great for fire farming? Okay, again, going back to what do we want this character to do? We don't want this character to be a one-note character. We want this character to be able to go out and do a number of different things in game. And there's actually a armor set that is more fire armor than fire armor ever was, but could be. And we'll get to that in a couple minutes. Or, knowing me, probably half an hour because I'll take too long explaining everything. Fire armor is so low because it has, like Dark, a self-res. This is a wasted power slot that's only there when you die. It does have Burn, which is a powerful attack. It's as good as your secondary or primary powers, depending on which one your attacks are in. The problem is, because Burn is treated as another power, you do have to fit it into an attack chain. And, excuse me for a second. Anyways, because Burn, you have to fit it into attack chain as another power. It doesn't really add it. With Fire Aura, you are not trading off survivability for more damage. You're just trading off survivability for another attack and nothing that really boosts the set's actual damage. Okay, you do get some extra damage in Consume, but whoop-de-doo, other sets also have some damages or something attached to their endurance recovery. Now, the Paragon devs did attempt to address some of the egregious issues with how terrible fire armor was and some of the easily dropped powers. Temperature protection, for example, gains to resist the slow effects. So fire armor is no longer the worst performing armor set, but it never has lived up to what it was sold as the set that you play fire armor because you're trading off how long you can live for how much damage you can do, because you really don't do any much more damage compared to other archetypes because your damage boost is bound up into a click power and you're wasting a power slot that your most powerful attack only kicks in when you've died. It doesn't. Now, it'd be one thing if Rise of the Phoenix returned and the Phoenix Blaze, and if you're not dead and you click it, you gain splash damage for all attacks, a splashier version of Fiery Embrace, or maybe splash damage with, say, take something from thermal radiation and you do a minus resist proc on all enemies that are affected by the splash damage. If something like that was done, then yes, Fire Aura could take the could actually be the set where you take this set because you are trading off survivability, but well, just look at what you can do with damage. All right, that's why it's just so low. Yes, if we were just doing strictly fire farms, Fire Aura would be probably at the top of the list, but we're not doing just strictly fire farms. We're looking at things that beyond. We're looking at avatars that we can just take and go play anywhere else. Not just something that's only good for one scenario until we dump a metric ton of resources into it. Shield. Shield is low because it doesn't have an active DOT. Is that my phone? Oh. Tropical Depression 7E has formed in the Eastern Pacific. Thanks for letting me know. And let's kick you off. Um, okay. Shield defense. No damage over time. Shield defense, like SR before it, can soft cap almost ludicrously easily. Is it consistent? Yes, it's consistent. Is it predictable? Yes, it's very predictable. The reason I put shield so low on this list is because two of the powers, failing fighting and grant cover, are almost reliant, or they are reliant on teammates to power them. If you are primarily a solo player playing for yourself, you're having to give up two slots or two powers that really aren't buying you anything. So you have no damage, you got no DOT, and this is another one where you've got a click anti-mess. So if you're it's not really fitting what we're looking for in a first character resource generating. Yes, it's a good mix of defense and resistance. Yes, you do get an attack with it. Uh, that actually does something more. It does give you a charge into battle or a charge out of battle, a shield charge. But it's just so low because of failing fighting and grant cover. You really can't play this character to the best that it can be without a team. All right, next up is Stone Armor. Now, Stone Armor, and let's turn back on and bring you. I'll just invisit next time. And we'll just leave it like that. All right. So our Stone Armor, and we'll bring up a specific character. We're actually going to go and grab the pre my and I'm nope, there it went. All right. This was my Stone Armor prefix, and this was before some changes were made to both the mace set and some enhancements were added. And this was like this was really the character where I first started passive farming. Now, right now, I'm not in granite armor. I've got rock armor, brimstone armor, crystal armor, minerals, tough, weave, and stone skin turned on. And as you can see, I've got soft cap to smashing lethal, energy negative, psionic, fire, cold defenses. I've got some really good resistances to fire cold, okay resistances to smashing lethal. This is before I've even turned on granite armor. And when I made this build, I was focusing purely on how good could I make how good can I make stone armor outside of granite? And I kind of just use granite as a proc for holding a global recharge speed, a run speed, and I did give it some resist. And then I clicked in on it. And now I'm really, really soft capped to smashing lethal, energy negative, fire cold, and now I'm hard capped on resist to, well, everything but psionic. Stone is really great. If you want another player, I'm not sure if I should actually say his name out loud, uh, but he has a saying that if you want to feel like a god, you play a brute. If you want to be a god, you play a tank. Stone tankers are completely awesome. If you've already got a stone tanker, they're actually really easy because of granite armor to turn into a passive farming machine. You really don't have to do a whole lot of work because granite armor has so much power built up into it. You really just need to take, weave, maybe slot stone skin out and slot tough out, maybe pick up a few cheap IOs, but you can just walk into. And this is really how I started farming is passive farming is I just ran my stone take into a Fire Farm Junction and just left her there on park while I went to work. I came back and she was still living. I had a bunch of recipe drops and significant amount more influence. I'm kind of going, oh, hey, and that was nice. All right, so stone armor. Why, if it's so great, why is it so low on the list? It's actually at the midpoint. This is really where we get into the armors where these are the ones where I would take. If I would roll a dice, and these would be the armor that I would pick from, because we have one, two, three, four, five, six. So 6-sided dice, roll a dice. We're into the armors, our top six that I might take, might build. Oh, hello, my cat. My cat has returned, which means in about a minute or two, he's going to be begging for food. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, and I'm going to go feed my cat. Alright. The cat has been fed and is no longer looking at me like I'm a oversized clawing tree. Okay, so sewing things up again. So stone armor. Might use it, might roll a dice, might make it an option to be used. Alright, so I think we're done with you for now. So we'll turn stone off. And we'll go to the next on the list, which is bio. Okay, why is bio why is it in the fifth? Well, I have multiple bios. I started with a Psi Bio Brute. I did a Bio Rad tank, a Biokinetic melee tank to show that Bio can make any power set, even a lackluster set like Kinetic Melee look good. And I did a Bio Spines just because somebody uh, wondered if I had a Bio Spine to replace my Fire Spines or my Spines Fire, and went, yeah, that probably makes sense. And then I've done an Ice Bio Sentinel. So done a lot of bios, and my takeaway on bios are this. They are incredibly resource intensive. Bio armors they're like a Mitsubishi. In the right gear at the right time in a Mitsubishi, you go around the corner screaming your tires like Jeremy Clarkson. In the wrong gear at the wrong time, you go around the corner with everybody wondering which grandma is at the wheel like James May. Right. Thus, bio armor, while it does have some unique features in the form of adaptation, which gives you an offensive, a defensive, and an efficient mode, which actually do make it really compelling for low-level grinding up play. You can just throw yourself into efficient when you're just running with other teams, and now your endurance costs aren't as intensive. You can throw yourself into defensive when you're going into a passive farm, and just increase your overall survivability. So bio is one that I would use with the caveat that it is not a defensive or resistive set like another set we're about to come to. Bioarmor's power is in its regenerative capabilities and in its ability for the player to have multiple tools with parasitic aura, ablative carapace, inexhaustible, and DNA siphon to respond to events happening around a player. It can be made to do passive, but if you're looking for a good return on it, you will need to dump resources into it. Still, it is a candidate for what we're doing here, low level play. Electric. Electric was originally my top choice, and if you were actually watching one of the previous streams while I was in the middle of it, eh, the reason why electric fell from top to 4 is I started running the numbers after the stream crashed out and kind of went, all right, this is going to take more resources to make good. It satisfies, it's got a damage over time and lightning field. It's got it really early. Its aggro management is really good. It's very consistent, very predictable. And its minimum resource outlay for a tank isn't bad. You got 2 powers you can easily skip to bring in something else later on. And I realize, I said the same thing about dark armor. You've got powers that are easy to skip. Electric, but power sync may be very useful in low level play, medium range play, because you can regain your endurance very easily with just a click power. Why would I not use it? Well, we'll bring back up PhD and we'll do a new clear. And let's turn you back on, and there we are. And we're going to go to Elect Armor. And we're going to grab all of our shields. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before with invulnerability. Combat jumping, maneuvers, kick, tough, weave. Alright, and I'm going to go into info mode, and we're just going to bump these up. And I don't know if you can hear what music I've got in my ear, but Manifest just dropped a new release, and Light It Up is just like pure awesome. I just got the instrumental track going, so hopefully I don't start trying to sing along to it because nobody wants to hear that. Okay, that's our convenient defense resist powers in play. What does it look like? Well, we're actually doing really good on smashing lethal energy and uh, resistances. We're kind of doing okay on fire cold, but our defenses are, well, trash. Now, we could get around this by uh, if we were running a second character that, let's go look at a defender real quickly. Playstyle, turn playstyle off, defender. And if we went like a cold domination defender, our ice shield gives us some resistance to fire damage, 10% base. So we're now at 64% of fire resist. Our glacial shield gives us. Stay on glacial shield, please. Which one was it? Was it? All right. Frostwork gives us maximum hit points, and Arctic Fog gives us +5 defense and more resistance to fire, 20%. So now we're up 64, 74, 84%. So if we're running with a cold dom who's put any kind of any resistance boosts into any of their powers, they're already pushing us into hard cap for fire cold resist. So if you're running with a teammate, cold domination actually would make a lot of sense. In if you're dual boxing, you just have uh your cold dom just throw ice shield on auto and just hover over you with the Arctic fog adds stealth, and that's maybe not conducive to standing around and farming. Just saying. And if we look at another defense boost, which making sure I'm time manip, you've got what is it? Farsight. Bring up the information on Farsight. You get it really early at level 18, and you got plus 12.5% defense to everything. So you're looking at 11 plus 12. You're looking at still only middling range defenses. So maybe time wouldn't work so well. What about force field? Well, if you're dual boxing and you've got deflection shield up, you don't get anything to fire, but your insulation shield does give you 15 strength to fire defense. So now we're buffed that up. You're probably 20, 22%, 22 plus 12. You're getting closer. You're getting closer to a soft cap. If your defender's also pulling along, say maneuvers, you might actually be into defensive soft caps. Actually, you would be into defensive soft caps because of dispersion bubble. So dispersion plus insulation shield. So if you're running an electric, you could have a force field buddy who has stealth, has spirit ward, has dispersion bubble, is sitting on top of you. So 10% defense plus 15% defense. That's 25%. 25 plus the 12 you're bringing. Um, well, that should not be hard. That's um, 25 plus 12. So you're at 37. You add in maneuvers, and you're getting really, really close. Oh, I don't even have maneuvers turned on. Okay, let's turn on maneuvers. Okay, now we're at 15%. So we're at 15% plus 15%, 30 plus 10%. We're at 40. With defender maneuvers, we're really close to soft cap. So an electric plus a force field defender probably could actually get us really close to just sitting in the middle of a farm very early on. Again, you could accomplish this with single origin enhancements or crafted IOs at a lower level, and you could be really close to maximum resist, because Insulation Shield will also give you. Oh, maybe it was. I'm now. Insulation Shields only gives you defense, not resist. Uh, but you'd still be. You'd be doing pretty good. So it's an option. It's a toolbox option, but electric's still kind of high up there for how you can force multiply. Alright, let's go back to our melee damages. Well, actually, we'll turn that off since we're not really focusing on anything else. And we'll turn you off for a second and go back to our little notepad. And next after electric is radiation. Now, radiation, like bio armor, is more about the regeneration and healing capabilities and the absorbs that it brings rather than strict resist or defensive capability. It does have high resist, but so much power is tied up in the regenerations, and those regenerations really don't take a lot of IO investment to really make them work, simply because there's not a whole lot of if you're relying on, and we'll bring back up PhD for a second. I know I'm swapping back and forth between calling it mids and PhD, and that's because on the secret server, it was called PhD for the developer who was maintaining it, and we were very careful to separate PhD builds from mids builds because players coming in off the live server who might be trying to remake their live server characters using builds they had saved would be like, what's different? Why has this changed? Why isn't my mids build working? Why can't I make this? And then having to explain that mids is out of date. We've got to fork from it. All right, yeah. Tangents. Be here. I'm actually looking for a scrapper, and we'll sort by name. And I want Street Justice. Where are you? Street Justice R7 Delta. And here we go. This is a scrapper, and this scrapper is pushing 45% to smashing lethal, 45% to fire cold, 44.52 to melee. And Beta Decay has a 2-hit debuff, so as long as you're within melee range, you are at soft cap to melee defense, and you can even be at soft cap to AoE defense. And if we look at our resist, they're not too bad either. Middling range, a tanker would be higher. Now, if I click on our particle shielding, and then take a look, our regeneration is pulling in, as you can see, 579%, which is giving a return 44.84%. This is on top of Gamma Boost, which gives you an auto self regen recovery. Now, a uh, if you're running a limited character and you're not optimizing, it would be actually valuable at low levels to put lots of slots into Gamma Boost. And then we have Radiation Therapy, which is a radiation armor does not have a traditional damage over time toggle. It's got a damage over time click with radiation therapy, which also does a faux regeneration and removes the enemy's ability to resist regeneration debuffs. That's the res regen down at the end. Okay. Next, if we look over the info, it'll tell us effective foes will have their regeneration rates reduced substantially. And then we run out of space. Oh, well, you can read it. Why don't I just look at it here? Radiation. Let's close that. Radiation therapy. You concentrate your enemies. Effective foes will have their regeneration substantially reduced for a short time. Okay, so that's actually very useful. But this is a hideously expensive build to make. A tank might be cheaper to make, but it's still an option. Simply because of the performance of the scrapper, a tank gets better resist. It'll be easier to take to soft cap defenses. If we combo it up with something else, it really is an option. And radiation armor also gives us ground zero, which is a PBOE attack that also heals teammates. So we got something that's useful if we're alone, and something that's useful if we're with a team. We got meltdown, which is the gold standard for how T9s should be handled. We've got a self recharge and beta decay, which also gives us our taunting. Now, is that enough to offset no constant DOT? And can we get away with simply standing in the middle and clicking on an attack rather than using radiation therapy? Probably. That's why radiation is certainly one of the powers that could be used. I don't think his resource outlay is going to be that egregious. But, if that's the one I wound up with, we'd find out. All right. Number 2, willpower. Now, I've told this story before, and I keep telling it and telling it and telling it and telling it. I had like a level 30 something, 32, 33 staff willpower tank or willpower staff tank. Basically, you cannot get a worse performing. This is even staff even performs worse than kinetic melee, and yes, that's possible. Staff is currently the worst performing melee set, period. Staff. So I took this willpower staff character, and you may have seen her in an earlier live stream because she's one of the ones that I had. Well, actually, when I was doing one of the first tests with F. Ingleta, my willpower staff was who I had farming her up. Because it was kind of slow. I knew that uh, with the willpower staff, I wouldn't blow past the levels I was looking to achieve. One of the reasons why I dealt with using such a slow farmer. But I know because of that willpower didn't take a lot to be able to live and grind her own way up inside of 707. And it has other bonuses. You got quick recovery. So we don't like bio armor. We have something to counter the endurance drains and the clicks kind of early on because quick recovery comes in at level 12. We do get a taunt with Rise to the Challenge. We don't get a constant DOT, but if we picked a quicker PBAOE attack, our basically here, it doesn't have damage over time, but the minimal resource outlay is astounding. The aggro management is okay, is very consistent and very predictable. And as the more enemies get close to it because of Rise to the Challenge, your regeneration just increases. So that's why willpower is my number 2 pick. And finally, my top tier pick, the one where if I'm not rolling a dice to run it, and we'll go tanker, ice armor, frozen armor, wet ice, and we'll just grab the same thing we did before, taking our easy to get to, easy to take defense and resist powers. And now we'll fill everything up. I'm sorry, I'll try not to whistle. Bum bum. Yeah, no humming either. No whistling, crunk! Pull the lever, crunk! Wrong lever! Is that my voice? And everyone who's cracking up laughing. Sorry, not really. Okay. And there we go. Our quick and easy defenses. What does this look like? Wow. We've barely done anything. We haven't even activated this particular power, and we're already at, with just theoretically on single origin enhancements or crafted IO enhancements, at 43% smashing lethal energy negative. We're not doing so great on fire cold, and our fire resist and cold resist aren't anything to write home about. So let's click on energy absorption. Oh, we are into soft cap smashing lethal energy negative. Ice can soft cap those defense types very easily. And if we lock off energy absorption and ramp it all the way up, ice can actually get around 30, as we see here, 27, 28% defense to fire cold, while smashing lethal energy negative. We're within a few percentage points now uh, of going into incarnate soft cap on this armor. And we haven't even dealt with the IO bonuses at all, or any enhancements. If I just add, we'll go over to permafrost for a second. If I just add the resist defense and the gladiator's armor defense proc at full mob saturation, I'm already at 33% to fire cold. If I had that aforementioned bubbly hen standing over me, I'd be well into fire cold soft cap defenses. If I had a Sonic standing over me bringing maneuvers into play. Or, if I just went with a cheap, or theoretically cheap, armor set like Aegis. And I've got 2 places I could put an Aegis set right off the bat. Let's check that. Alright, yeah. So I've got a couple places where I could put an Aegis set. And I've got maybe a really low barrier to getting really close to fire cold defense, while easily being in the smashing lethal energy negative soft cap defenses. Now, admittedly, that's predicated on energy absorption. I turn energy absorption off, and we see even with just those 2 IOs, which we could afford just by getting all of the I think we could afford by getting all of the exploration badges and running a couple of quick missions, maybe joining in on a positron task force that's running, and we could go and buy those. And we're already into smashing lethal energy negative soft caps, which gives us great viability over a wide range of different task forces or events we could go join with. We'd have to do a little bit of work to close that fire cold gap, but we could close it without if we just focused on nothing but fire cold defense boosts and IOs, and we just accepted we're buying IOs at a lower level. So ice, that's why ice is at the top of my list. It's got the PBAOE and ice and icicles. It's got another aggro management and chilling embrace. It's got some very good exotic protection going on, resists against slow, and it does resist defense debuff. Uh, Anything that takes away your defense, it resists it very well. All right. So how am I going to decide which one? Well, I kind of already thought about how I was going to do this. And watch one second while I check and see. Okay, that's tied there. And now we will, hopefully without screwing anything up this time or causing a crash out or another issue. Yeah, cutting the mic as I'm taking a drink is getting a little more intuitive. I'm just not sure where the cap just went, which I fear may have fallen into a shoe. No, not in the shoes. Well, that's a plus. There it is. I don't want to lose track of stuff that's on the floor because the cat will think, hey, it's a toy. And then there'll just be random water bottle cap somewhere. Okay. And let's load that. Okay. And log in. Now, there's a couple of different dice rolls actually in the game. So let's turn you back on and bring you up. There we are. And scoot you over. Okay. And now to go through our list of interacts. As I try to remember. Okay, there we are. Roll dice. Which one am I going to take? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, And if I really wanted to be tacky, I'd just put the one that I'd want to take as number 7 and roll the Hess dice. But let's not do that. Alright, so interact, decide, roll dice. 5. We're going with bio. Alright. I'm going, was that even seen on camera? Come back to interact, decide, roll dice. Yep. All right, so the first roll was number 5, so we are going with bio. Honestly, I really wasn't looking forward to trying bio on this. Because I have nightmares of my brute and even my tanks going kersplat in the middle of a 707 farm. And because I forgot to set the right incarnate power, I forgot to set the right, like still in offensive mode, and they really needed to be in defensive or efficient. So this is going to be interesting. So we are decided. I am going to use bio armor. Oh, wow. And we're going to start out with inexhaustible, because inexhaustible should be an auto power. Yeah, Aurian Carapace is a toggle, inexhaustible is an auto. And for secondary powers, okay, attacks. What am I going to go with? I don't want to replicate a character I've already done, so radiation melee, kinetic melee, and spines are kind of already out. Do I go with dual blades, which gets Typhoon's Edge very early? Do I go, well, dark melee doesn't really have a good AoE. Do I go with claws for spin? Do I go with broadsword? Do I go with battle axe? Don't ask about energy. Okay, energy melee actually could be pretty interesting. You get whirling hands very early. We've got this new power crash that could actually work. Ice melee could. Well, frozen aura is really late in the build, so that's kind of going. We're going to be at a really high level before we get any serious AoE damage. Katana, I love Katana. Lotus drops comes in at 28. That's really long time to go before you get a PBOE. For comparison, dual blades, Typhoon's Edge is available by 16. Claws, spin by 16. All right, broadsword and battle axe. Well, whirling axe is available early at level 20, so not so bad. Energy melee, whirling hands comes in at 16. Or did we already do that one? Kinetic melee. Well, we're not doing kinetic melee because I've already done it. I'm working on a bio or a martial arts bio scrapper, which I completely forgot to mention when I was listing off my bio characters earlier. They do get Dragon Tail at 20, but since I've already kind of got that going, skip that. I've done Psi Bio, so we're skipping that. Well, I've done Psi Bio. Radiation Melee done. Savage Melee. Rendering Flurry comes in at what level? Weird. 20. Okay, so Rendering Flurry is going to be 28 again, really late. No, just no. Eye of the Storm does come in at 16, and it would be interesting to staff fighting with Bio, see whether or not Bio can make staff melee look good. Stone melee, Tremor, it is Tremor, but Tremor comes in kind of late, 28. Street Justice doesn't really get a PBAOE. Super Strength, just hell no. Super Strength, all right. Super Strength is the set I don't talk about when I talk about set balance, because Super Strength is fundamentally broken right now. One of the secret devs fixed the underlying code issue, It was an actual bug, and when fixing some of the bugs in the background of the engine, he fixed the bug that allowed Rage's double stack to negate the debuff. So presently, Rage, when it crashes for the full effect. There is no way to avoid that effect. Right now, I would describe Super Strength as completely unplayable. It's not just that it's a bad performing set; it's that it's literally unplayable. There are no builds that you can create, even heavily optimized builds, that can overcome the Rage debuff. It's so far out of balance. It's not even just somebody made a few punctuation errors. Nobody It's not that somebody skipped a decimal point. This is worse than Warshade. It is fundamentally worse than Warshade. That's how bad it is. So skipping that. Titan weapons doesn't give us a click PBAOE. It does have, don't get me started. And War Mace, we do get Whirling Mace at 20. I love War Mace. It's really predict. So let's narrow this down. Let's go with sets that have a PBOE by 16. And that would be Claws, Dual Blades, My Cat is Returned, Energy Melee. Let's check. Whirling Hands is 16, yes. I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm kind of leaning towards Energy Melee. Fire Melee is a skip for various reasons, least of which Fire Sword Circle just comes so friggin' late. Ice Melee skip. Katana. I'd almost be willing to make an exception for Katana because you do get, when you get to Soaring Dragon and Golden Dragonfly, it kind of makes up for it, but not enough. Burst comes in at 28, so well, I've already done Kinetic Melee, so it's out. Dragon's Tail comes in at 20. I'm already doing Martial Bio Scrapper. I've done Sonic, so that's out. Radiation Melee. Atom Smasher is all the way down at the end. Savage Melee, Rendering Flurry comes in at 28. Already doing his spines. Staff. Stone Melee's out because Tremor's so late. Street Justice, no. Super Strength, hell no. Titan Weapons, War Mace. And War Mace, we get it at 20. So we've got 4 to choose from. Claws, Dual Blades, Energy, Melee, and Staff. Now we're going to add, to give us our 6, we're going to add War Mace. Now War Mace and actually War Mace and Axe are basically the same, as horrible as that sounds. And we get irradiated Grant. Well, I've already done Biosize, so why am I even looking at that? I need a 6th one. And I can just hear somebody saying, well, why don't you just take Super Strength and for the challenge? I like challenges. I don't like necessarily punish. Look, I'm not into that whole attaching. I'm not into that whole pressing tasers into my gut and setting them off levels of pain and punishment. You'd have to be into that in order to think that Super Strength is a good idea. Pro tip, devs, fix it! Alright, since I realize I'm already going off on a tangent here, we actually already did test a fix on the Secret server. It was called Inherent Strength, and instead of giving you to click on Rage, you got a constant bonus to your strength that could be enhanced. And Inherent Strength worked great. It should have been swapped out then and there, done, tested, get rid of Rage. And when people ask, well, what happened to my Rage? You go, it broke. Cryptic screwed it up to begin with. The bug was in the system, and because the bug negated the power, This is one of the things that legitimately pisses me off. I mean, I'm looking at the microphone and it's spiking into the red. So I know my volume is increasing, my tempo is increasing. I'm obviously getting agitated and upset because this is how much I despise how Gecko and Jack Emmert and all of the original Cryptic developers approached power balancing. I mean, you can't say they didn't know what they were doing because there was no other game like this. There still is no other game like this. They were breaking entirely new ground. I can't fault them for not understanding the implications and what could casually happen as a result of what they were doing. I can't. That's unfair to them. It's unfair to the amount of work they put into it, and that they tried. They really did try. They didn't succeed, but they did try. What they didn't try on is when they came across bugs, actual legitimate bugs, they didn't fix them. I can hear some people say, well, that's the fault of the publisher. The publisher said they had to ship by this date and they weren't given the time or resources to fix it. Well, that reflects badly on NCSoft. It does, and there's no way NCSoft can get away from they were a terrible publisher for City of Heroes. They didn't understand the game either. I mean, the fact that they even published it at all is a miracle. uh, Looking back at that time as what was going on in the gaming industry, that City of Heroes even happened. It's just amazing. But when you and my big problem here is when you predicate the performance of a set around a bug, an actual code level, system level bug, when that's what your system is predicated around, and you don't fix it, and your players go for years expecting behavior of a set that is predicated on a bug, an error, a processing that is not occurring, and you didn't fix it instead of going in and fixing it and then making the power work like players expected it to work. That's laziness on a level that makes not that that's laziness on a level of not building your client in Windows and Linux at the same time to make sure that your multiple compilers are catching very specific bugs and that you have a greater chance of it's called good code practicing. It's writing good code to begin with. If you can cross compile to Windows and Linux at the same time and every code update you make just compiles, you don't get any errors and it goes through, your code's probably in pretty good shape. If it's not, then you've got to fix your code. And if Cryptic had practiced any kind of good coding practices, any at all, when they were creating this game, some of these expectations, well, the game could have gone in a completely different direction. Maybe the saying had been made, City of Heroes succeeded in spite of the lead developers, not because of the lead developers. But that's where when developers later come along who have the time to sit down, figure out what's happening, and then fix the code, and then when they fix processing errors, like focusing on ambush farm for a second. If your ambush farm causes all of your processors in the server rack to crank to maximum clock speed and you can wipe out an entire everybody's zone, that map shard just goes off because a single ambush farm just killed your processing performance. Your code is heavily unoptimized. You need to fix it. When someone comes along later and tries to fix that code, they need to be able to fix that code. And that's what happened. Someone came along later, much later, fixed the code, the problem that was causing performance bottlenecks, and optimized the code so that it worked like it was intended to work, or at least as the documentation intended it to work, and suddenly Rage is broken and Super Strength is now unplayable. That we never got inherent strength into place, I can understand why. There's a lot of players who were, it's called the village or the cottage house rule. If players have a barn and they come back and it's suddenly a cottage, they get a little kind of like, why is there a cottage here? Well, sometimes you just have to go, we gave you the cottage because the barn burnt down and is currently in ashes. There's no more barn. The barn's gone. You got a cottage now. Deal with it and just move on. Just deal with the whining and the complaints and just move on. that and I can't fault the secret devs for not having gone ahead and gone through with the inherent strength change. I think the plan at one point was to make it a branching option, and then branching for a number of reasons. once you set the predication that any power can be branched at any time because it's not what players expect, instead of just taking the heat for we replaced the power that was broken from the start, was broken since issue 1, was broken since issue 0, we fixed the bug, and now the set's unplayable. So we redesign. Super Strength needs a redesign from the ground up to better reflect what the power is supposed to do rather than just generic punches. It may end up using the same animation, it may even be Super Strength 2.0, or it may just be an inherent strength power and people can just keep using Super Strength on the characters they've already created. There's different ways that can go. Alright, trying to get back to where was I? We have claws, dual blaze, energy, melee, staff. So we've opened up our final slot to something with. I'm skipping battle axe and broadsword because they're basically the same thing as war mace. They actually were because these powers were created before weapon customization. If these powers had been created when you had weapon customization, they would have all probably just been weapon set and you just change your weapon out. The live devs, Paragon and Cryptic, at some point made balance passes to try and make the set perform differently, but they really don't. All right, so Dark Melee was out because it doesn't really have a PBOE. Electric Melee is a skip for multiple reasons. And Fire Melee, that's at 28. Ice Melee, kind of would want to try it. I'm still tempted to make the uh, exception for Katana. I've already done Kinetic, already done Martial, already done Scion, already done Radiation. Savage Melee, tempted to make an exception. Already done Spines. We've already got Staff listed. Stone Melee, skip. Already done Street Justice. Oh yeah, I have a Street Justice. No, it's Street Justice Rad. I planned up the Street Justice bio, but never actually made it because I made a bio. Hang on. Be right back. Sorry about that. All right, so Street Justice. I've never made one, but that was why I made the Marsh because for I kind of did the dice roll thing for Street Justice versus Martial Arts bio for my scrapper. All right, so Super Strength is out, so we're really just going to need to make an exception here. So between Katana or Ice Melee. No, well, I haven't done Fire Melee since my first Fire Melee. We do get Combustion kind of early, but our actual PBOE is Fire Sword Circle at 28. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll set up a different. Yeah. And we'll set up a different chain here of Fire, Ice, Katana. And we'll weight this at 1-3. We'll rate this at 2-6. And we'll rate you at 4-5. Okay, and now we We'll move our notepad kind of out of the way. And now we will actions, interact, decide, roll dice. 3, fire. All right. So our 6 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Interact, decide, roll dice. 3. Energy melee! Wow. And I do recall earlier in the stream, I said I was really thinking about making an about just taking energy melee. Woo! Oh, yeah, I like my pom poms of doom. Okay, some people ask, you know, your costumes. I got a bunch of them. So let's pick something. I've always liked this costume. A little severe, though. However, the guy costumes have really terrible hair color and hair options. But yeah, I could see that working. That's why and part of this is a lot of my characters, well, have cat ears, and on the female side, it's very easy to get hair that covers the ears, so that you can hide that a specific character, and this is what you'll hear me say Cinder's class sometime as a reference to a particular fire build. This is the character that the class is named after. So I like hoods, or I like things that hide the ears. And then we have, I like this costume as well. I don't think I've ever actually used this in game. So this may be the costume that, so kind of shortlisted it to, we've shortlisted to D Blue. And, well, D Blue and D Blue and Disexistent 2 are pretty much just the same, just a palette swap, a little bit different up top. And this is actually my War Shade. And I really do love how the cyberface here gives a cat-like look, even though that wasn't intentional. Or maybe it was on the dev's part. And there was that in white. I don't think it works quite as well. Existence. This is one of the costumes that I used for the... I really do like the deeper reds. I think it shows up better. City of Heroes is one game that would really benefit from HDR, but I have no idea how difficult it would be to implement. We'll skip the Disexistence for now. Well, actually, no, we'll do Existence, and we may swap to blue or to a different color. Skip those. I'm not seeing energy melee in that. Maybe seeing a little bit of energy melee in this. Yeah, we can see energy melee being flung from that. So, Glitteranium 2. Yes, I have a cat theme. Whatever gave you that idea? Oh, could definitely see energy melee coming out of that. MS1. Again, the deeper reds just really set off versus the lighter reds. Yes, I can in fact make a character that does show some skin. Not often, but it is possible. Alright, here we got some more existence builds. Now, since we already got existence earlier on, I think existence 5. Pyre. Yeah, change up the colors. Could see. We'll shortlist Pyre on a second. Hello, Jose. It's been a few decades. Yes, this actually was a tribute costume to the webcomic Rave Kitty on Keenspot, years ago. The author of that webcomic actually did play City of Heroes live, uh, and I played with them. And one day, Riot and I showed up as Rave Kitty and as the other lead character. Uh, and Matt chose to put the black cat on his shoulder. And the other kind of like, do you realize that the black cat, really doesn't like her, right? Just hilarious. Well, it was, but yeah, this is one of those. Don't ask me what I was thinking. Actually, I do know what I was thinking. I was trying to make a robot build, uh, and I got to this point, and I couldn't decide if I was either going to laugh or need to go get a tetanus shot. So I saved the costume just in case I ever was compelled to come back and work on it later. I really do like the Wave Ring, but this is pretty much an existence build. So we'll pass by that. And I do like this build, but it's pretty much the same as uh, that one, just a palette swap. I mean, I do like how the colors work together. But this one, you can see I did a kind of revision to, and the idea was this is predicated on a Spice Girl, hence the salsa siza pun going on with the naming scheme. And the idea is she's spicy. So I needed something that was obnoxious, mismatched, but still color coordinated. So that's what we got. And again, the light reds just don't really work. And I think this was a costume I made for somebody got married. Fancy? I think Fancy Love got married. And I think this was like something I created to wear to the wedding party. No, that's really going back years. I'm really kind of tempted to add it to the. We'll add it to our short list. Shield Rumble. Shocking. Oh, this is another one that this worked out better than I'd intended. The circuitry on the face looking more like cat whiskers from a distance, so it increases the feline aspect. Sugi, you can see Sugi and Sunday are basically just a palette swap and a skirt lengthen. Hi, Tanklet. Yes, I still have this costume. That was one of my first tests for the final option. And this is again, I know what I was thinking. And there was my original Warshade costume from Live Server. I mean, I kind of like it. And there we go, Existence with Wings. With the music I've got playing on Light It Up in the background, it just. Mm. Alright. Also known as the Rimlia July costume. And now we're down into the costumes I was using for Evengleta. Alright, so we've actually got 6 possible costumes that I uh, would ramp into bio energy melee. So let's roll the dice and find out which costume I'm using. Interact. Decide. Roll dice. 2. Existence 5. Step forward. Alright. That's pretty much, was that Existence with wing? Oh, different wing backings. I think I was trying out the different wings with different fly poses. Now, since our tank here is probably not going to be taking fly, the wings probably aren't going to be necessary, but so we'll go ahead and first thing we'll change is our back, and we're going to go with a backpack. Now we're doing bio energy melee. And I really like going with the Cybertech spine because it does give the impression of armor on the back without being obnoxious about it. Alright. Okay, so next up what do our powers actually look like? What's bio armor's original colors? We got this kind of yellow. So let's settle on our colors first. We'll change the color tenable. And what screams energy? A blue? Maybe a blue and a yellow? A lighter blue and a... maybe a gold? Really light blue and a gold? How do we like that? Maybe a blue on blue, maybe a blue on dark blue. Maybe a blue on dark green. Oh, whoa, whoa. Can I... go with... what's that gonna look like? Okay, so we've got a... Now we'll just do match colors across all powers, and now we'll go back and we'll start and we'll change these to minimal FX. All right, all right. So we got a blue, pink,